You may have heard this term thrown around, abstraction. Computer scientists are obsessed with it. Abstraction is the idea of separating out the overall concepts from their implementation. So what does that mean when you're building something? Let's think about handheld electronics. Chances are you have something right now in your pocket that is electronically based, but maybe you're not an expert in wiring or electrical engineering. You still know how to use it. The reason for that is because chances are the creator of this device has put some plastic or rubber around this item and added buttons so you know exactly how you can interact with it. This abstraction away from the implementation makes it so much easier for you as a user to interact with this device and get things done. It also protects the device from getting hurt or being in a bad state. This is what we're going to learn to do to our code. The way that you abstract is with something called encapsulation. Encapsulation is the act of hiding away implementation details from the user. So this is what forces that separation. When you hide things you don't want your user to interact with, that's when you're encapsulating it. You can later choose what you want to expose to the user. Encapsulation is really about protecting your code, making sure that you, as the code's creator, know what are good states and what are bad states and what the user actually wants out of your code. It's protecting them from having to understand everything that you've written and from getting any unexpected errors because they don't know exactly what's allowed or not allowed. In practice, this really comes down to one keyword, whether you're going to use public or private. Chances are you've been making everything public up until now, which essentially is like leaving your device without a plastic casing. Anybody can come in and just muck around and do whatever they want. Now we're going to learn to be very intentional about when we apply the private keyword and start hiding away those implementation details. The private keyword can be applied to fields or methods. And this means when you've made something private that only you, meaning the class that they are in, know that those things are there and can use them. So for example, if you had a private field, you can change that value, but nobody else can even know that it's there. Here's an example of making a field and a method private. If you haven't been using the public keyword up until now, Java actually defaults to public. So in order to make something private, you have to type out private to be absolutely sure that external code can't alter your fields or your methods. Once you've got everything hidden away, you need to be very intentional about what you actually expose. If you make everything private, nobody can use your code. So there's a couple different types of methods that make it very easy for your user to engage with your object. The first type is called an accessor method. This allows your user just to see into your object. It usually just returns back the value of a field. It's sort of like a read-only mode. Let's say you have a private keyword. Here's an example of an accessor method. It just returns back the current state of the field. But because it just returns it back, it means that the user can't actually change it, which makes it nice and protected. This is often called a getter method because it just goes in and gets a value from your code and returns it back to the external code. The second type of exposing you want to do is called a mutator method. This is where you do let your user engage and actually change the state of your object. But it gives you the freedom to determine how a user is going to change something. Again, let's say we have a private field. Here's an example of a mutator method. As you can see, it does take in a parameter, and then it does alter the value of the field. Now, this is a pretty simple mutator method and essentially gives your user all the power in the world. But maybe you want to throw an exception if they pass in a bad value, or maybe you want to make sure that they only pass in string values. This is limiting what your user can directly do and preventing them from getting in a bad state. Because these often change the value of a field, they're called setter methods. Learning what lines to draw between public and private is really the art of computer science and an important tool when you start to write bigger and bigger code bases. Generally, people will tend to make everything private and then go back and intentionally start to add public things. This makes it very easy for you to be very sure about what your user can do. And it's going to make your code really enjoyable for an external user to interact with. So mastering encapsulation is a key part of becoming a full-fledged software developer.